Let me just crunch these numbers very simply. Nearly 6 in 10 learners complete the full 13 years at school. That's called retention. It's currently at 58%. It has gone up over the years, so some good news there. Nearly 3 in 4 passed. The pass rate this year, 72.5%. And as the professor said earlier, nearly 1 in 4 obtaining a bachelor's degree. So let's start there. She said, Professor Rolnick, that there's greater equity when you look at the bachelor passes between the poor schools, the rich schools, but not a lot of detail there. What do you think about what she was saying about bachelor passes?
Well, I think the devil is in the detail. Because first of all, a bachelor pass is a minimum requirement for university. Now, there are only a certain number of places available at university. So when the universities are faced with more than 100,000 students knocking on their doors, and they've only got a place for a certain number of students, they have to limit the numbers. And so effectively, the pass that you need to get into university goes up. It's called qualification inflation, if you like. So, for example, in our program that we run in our department at WITS, we run a teacher education program, and in the break, Elizabeth was just telling me that we had to probably inflate the number of points that we would use to admit the students, because we only have a certain number of places.
Isn't this discouraging if you get a university entrance, but it doesn't give you entrance to university? Are we dealing with that psychological impact?
I think that this has been the case right from the beginning. The way we've set up these different kinds of passes, from the way we've moved from the old idea of the university exemption. It has been the situation that there's a bachelor pass, which does tell us something about the quality of the pass, but then admission to university is something completely different, and the universities set their own minimum requirements in terms of combinations of subjects that may be quite high compared to the minimum bachelor pass.
And there was concern years ago about even a need for bridging programs for some students at university. Can you comment on the quality of bachelor passes at the moment?
I'm going to hand to Marissa.
I used to work on one of those bridging programs, and the most fascinating thing about them is that they're disappearing. And
Which is good news.
Well, it's good news and bad news. They're disappearing because the universities are getting adequate numbers of suitably qualified students into the program. But when you look at the schools that the children come from, they come from only certain schools in the country. So you still got a situation where if somebody goes to school X and school X doesn't get good results, they don't stand any chance, for example, of going to study science at university.
Even if they get the bachelor pass, that's very
Even
sad.
if they get the bachelor pass, their bachelor pass may have maths literacy and not maths, which is another issue one needs to look into.
Let's look at maths and science, because this is a huge issue, and we know on huge competitiveness reports globally, South Africa languishing in that. She pointed to a figure, more than 1,700 more students achieving above 60% in maths, looking at black learners specifically. That's very small, though, just over 1,500 more out of hundreds of thousands. She also spoke about the TIMS, those exams that were held in 2015. How positive were those results, which she says are improving?
Well, you have to put that against what Professor John Volmink said the other night about the maths pass rate remaining flat over the last few years. The minister has chosen to talk about the people who got over 60%, and that's fairly appropriate. Just to put it in perspective, if you want to do statistics or actuarial science, you need beyond 70% in maths. So the maths passes, are very important, and the flatness. But the big problem is not just how people pass, because it's possible to drill people to pass exams. but how well they can actually function when they get into tertiary education. And that is about teaching for meaning. And there's far too little of teaching for understanding and teaching for meaning going on in the classroom. So one also needs to look at how many teachers are actually teaching for meaning. And a recent study that I've just supervised by a student of mine who is about to submit her PhD for examination found that the things that influence teachers' knowledge and teachers' ability to function are whether the teacher has done postgraduate studies. So is the teacher continuing to learn? And the teachers in her study, the ones that performed best were the ones who'd done master's degrees in education. And
is this at the higher levels of
this is
school?
a grade 12.
Or does it cut across?
Well, she was particularly looking at grade 10, a particular topic in grade 10. But I found it very interesting that you don't necessarily think that something like a master's is going to make such a difference to a teacher's performance. Yet in some countries, a master's is a minimum qualification to become a teacher. In countries like Finland, Germany and Holland, for example.
Okay, so that's so interesting. And when we come back, I think we should look at the educational foundation, the young learners, how they are helped or hindered at the lower levels. But let's return to Aldrin Sapir. He's been live at that announcement of our pass rate tonight in Midrand. Over to you, Aldrin.